Great Debaters Contest is brought to you by Safaricom M-Pesa. The Great Debaters Contest 2016 registration is now open. Teachers or school administrations should register on www.greatdebaterscontest.com/register.
Welcome to the best infotainment show this side of the Sahara, the Great Debaters Contest. This is our Nakuru edition. I am Mariam Bishar.
And I am Austin Nyumbok. We have Nakuru girls versus Upperhill mixed. Their motion is dependence on first world economies is a hindrance to African development.
We'll have the first proposer take the stage. You have 3 minutes.
My name is Cynthia Lutuvula from Upperhill Mixed Secondary School, and I'm here to propose on the motion that goes, dependence on the first world economies is hindrance to the development of Africa. According to the definition of Oxford Dictionary, I would like to define the terms and make it more demystifying to you, the audience. I'll start by the term dependence. Dependence comes from the term depend. To depend is to rely on something until you're able to trust it. While on the other hand, dependence means it is the state of needing the help or support from something or somebody in order to be successful or to survive. Secondly, economics, connected with the trade, industry, and development of wealth of a country, an area, or society. Hindrance. Hindrance is making it difficult for something or somebody to do something. In short, obstacle. Development. Development is the gradual growth of something so that it can become more advanced and stronger. First, I would like to go back to my first term, dependence. When we go back to history of China, they built over 2,000 years ago, they built a wall which was 6,300 kilometers long without the help of the World Bank, rather the foreign aid. While we in Africa, we always go for aid on small matters like building our roads, and also, for example, in Kenya, for building the standard gauge railway, we must borrow money from these first world economies countries for us to build a railway. You can imagine. That is dependence. Why don't we copy from this country that is China? It built its 6,300 kilometers wall without any help. As we all know, for example, our country, Kenya, is a hotbed of agriculture. We grow cash crops, for example, rice. Where do we take our produce after we have harvested? We sell them to these first world economies, of which, of course, it provides markets. That one I don't deny. But wait a minute. Come to think about it, right? After it has provided market for us, the third world countries, right? Again, for example, in Kenya, we will be struck by famine or drought after 2 years. Do you know what we will do? We will again start begging them to come and sell for us. While we are begging, we had the rice. We sold them. In return, they'll sell to us plastic rice, which is a health hazard we as human beings. Thank you.
Opposition, you have 3 minutes for your opening statements.
According to my research in the internet, I found out that dependence is the state of relying on or being controlled by someone else. A hindrance is a thing that provides resistance, delay, or obstruction to something. Now, 17 years ago, my mother gave birth to a great debater standing right in front of you, and she found it best to name me Waithaka Faith. From Nakuru Girls High School, I strongly oppose the motion that states dependence on first world economies is a hindrance to African development. The Newton's second law of motion states that a body remains in a state of rest or uniform motion unless acted upon by an external force. We can compare this body to the third world countries in Africa. We get to see that without this body receiving an external force, it will not move on, but it will remain at a state of rest. Same thing compares to Africa. Without us getting the aid from foreign countries, from the first world countries that have actually developed, we will only mark time in our position where we are. We will only remain underdeveloped. Now, as for me, I would not like to be called underdeveloped. I would actually seek for help and accept the fact that I need that help. With that help, I will be able to move on. Firstly, a quote from Joseph E. Stiglitz. He says that development is not only about transforming our economy, it's not only about transforming our countries, but it's also about transforming the lives of the people. Well, CNN reporter Charles Abugre from Zambia, he confirmed this and found evidence that first world aid has actually been successful in supporting these third world countries from Africa. And in turn, these third world countries have come out successfully from being aid dependent. Resulting to this, we see that these countries are now able to fend for themselves. They're able to provide for themselves. Take for an example, Rwanda. Let me inform you today that Rwanda's economy was 50% financed by foreign aid. And now we get to see that over a decade, it has doubled in size. And now its economy is fast diversifying and its agricultural sector is really emerging great. Now, I would like to tell you that debilitating diseases like, for example, tuberculosis and smallpox have actually been controlled thanks to targeted aid efforts. And for this, our millions of children are able to live and are able to be healthy thanks to this foreign aid. Thank you.
We'll hear rebuttals now. Proposition, you have 3 minutes.
No man can ride on your back unless it is bent. Osana Wamboi here from Upperhill Mixed Secondary School, and I'm here to oppose the motion that reads, dependence on first world economies is a hindrance to African development. The Chinese say, teach me how to fish. Please do not give me fish. For how long can a child depend on the parents? It is time for Africa to stand up because we are called the continent of plenty. Why depend on other people? Okay, as for myself, mean people don't bother me. But mean people who disguise themselves as being nice people bother me a lot, because these first world economies are trying to show us that they are helping us, and at the back of their minds they know that their generosity is not sincere, because at the end of the day they charge us interest for those funds that they give unto us. And surely, though we take those funds, we develop them, yes, Rwanda becomes clean, it becomes so attractive, beautiful to the eyes. But don't you think that those funds become a burden to our coming generation, to our next generations? Will our children be able to pay all those debts that we incur? Food for thought. Our opponents don't seem to know the history of Korea. Korea has transformed itself from a stagnant agrarian society into the world's most dynamic industrial economies of the world. Korea first launched its industrialization efforts. It was a typical poor developing country with poor resources, and production base was small on a small domestic market. But look at Korea right now. It is among the first world economies right now. What about Africa? Africa, we have always stood in the shadow of the first world economies. And as I've said earlier, they are pretending to be helping us and they are really not. Secondly, the first world economies induce a begging culture in ourselves. For how long will we continue to beg? For how long will we continue to stoop so low that we will always beg? I am from Coast and I want to give you one quote. It is a Swahili one, and it says, mtegemea cha nduguye hufa maskini. For how long will we continue depending on these people who are pretending to be so generous and yet they know what they are doing? Remember that every favor has a price. Thank you.
Opposition, time for a cross-examination, 3 minutes.
Sheila Chelagat from the Nakuru Girls High School. Well, time and time again, the issue of dependence has risen, fallen, risen again, and fallen further. But now today, we would like to turn your minds towards our point of view. And not only your minds, but also your hearts towards our attitudes toward dependence. The idea that those who share with those who don't is inherent in most societies. For example, the animals, the insects, and human alike. Well, international assistance is the instrument by which this human practice occurs in modern times across borders and should ordinarily not be controversial. Well, my fellow opponent said that this dependence is from mean people. Why would you term a person who is helping you as mean? Well, let me inform you today that the right word is generous. To begin with, foreign assistance comes in form of aid-supported scholarships, where African youth are sponsored to study abroad. Our very own example is the late Professor Wangari Maathai, studied in Kansas and came back to Kenya to make a huge step in environmental conservation. And through this, we see that through others, we become ourselves. And it's not only prominent people, because we see charity aid-based organizations come and take students who have finished their secondary education and sponsor them. And at the end of their study period, they come back to our nations and develop it. On to my second point is that natural and human-made disasters no longer kill the number of people it used to, as it were before we got the help from first world economies. Let us look at the famine in Ethiopia last year. The World Food Programme stepped in and provided food, and at least they were able to manage the people dying. And I guess it is true that sharing is essential to maintain and protect the collective, and empathy is an essential value to what is to be human. To my third point is that we are Africans, and majorly we depend on agriculture sector. Now, take a instance for a country like Kenya. We take part in horticultural products, and we grow flowers. Now, let me ask you, how many times have you bought flowers? Maybe we bought it during weddings, during funerals, and after that, what happens? Think about that.
The Great Debaters Contest 2016 registration is now open. Teachers or school administrations should register on www.greatdebaterscontest.com/register. The Great Debaters Contest 2016 registration is now open. Teachers or school administrations should register on www.greatdebaterscontest.com/register.
The proposers have been asked, they do not feel that African countries still have fairly young economies that require aid from the developed world, and the opposition have been challenged for how long will we be dependent on the first world. Proposer number 3, you have 3 minutes.
I want to answer my audience there. You want to say that Africa has a low, or its economy is still young. Now, if you look at America or the developed countries, they have had to exploit us so as to get the minerals so that they can make their economy to be stable. Now, how is that? Through colonialism. We are still being colonialized through the donors we get. This is through how? Let's see, for example, Ethiopia. Ethiopia has received $34 million, making it the highest recipient in the latest year. But it still lacks or lags behind in economy. This is true. Ethiopia has been forced to evict more than 10,000 of its populations to get out of its land so as to lead to the common investors of other countries. And as I will agree with Dr. Ravinde Reina, Department of Economics, University of Western Cape, who says that foreign aid has not helped but also caused famine, disease and malnutrition, pandemics and social disorder, thus hindering development. How is that? Like, for example, Kenya contains one of the biggest slums in Africa, but yet across it, there is the headquarters of the UN, claiming that it has helped in development, while we still lag behind like other nations. Through the Economist of Africa, it has been stated that Africa has not been given the policy space so as to determine their own trade policies and to set their own development priorities. Research states that Africans living in diaspora bring back a lot of money than compared to those donors that we get from outer Western countries. Now, if you look at Congo, for example, it is stated that they mine silica, which is used to make computer chips. Now, if you look at the Congo's economy right now, it's stated that they are experiencing chaos because the miners are being exploited. Yet China and UK are the ones benefiting. I would like to agree with my fellow colleague here who says everything has a price. Now Congo is facing the same problem that would if they had not stopped depending on the other countries. So I would like to urge my fellow opposers on this motion to move to the other side and come to the fact that we'll never move on until we stop depending on other countries. Thank you.
Opposition, you have 3 minutes to respond to the audience.
I stand here in front of you firmly to oppose this motion. But first of all, ladies and gentlemen, my lovely audience, receive greetings from the Nakuru girls. I go by the name Yvonne Awor. I'd like to answer a question that was asked or poses to us. For how long are we going to depend on these first world economies? Well, so for as long as you learn how to fish, or should I say that self-growth comes from being nurtured. I hope that is well understood. On to my first point. The dependence on first world economies has led to technological assistance, or should I say technical assistance. Africa, our motherland, we are very proud of our motherland. We were blessed. We have minerals. Thank you for noting that. Kenya, for instance, has minerals such as soda ash. We are very grateful, but the problem is we do not have the machines to excavate this soda ash. We need dredger, which comes from China. We are very grateful for China because of giving us such mechanical devices in order to excavate these minerals. This has caused increased development in our nations. I would like to ask Judge Baina, for instance, will you wake up one day and tell your producer that, you know what, today decide to do things by my own? No, you cannot. My lovely audience, who by the show of hands will stand firmly, beat their chest and tell their teachers, you know what, we can learn by ourselves, we do not need you. Who? My, oh my. I am very surprised that even our fellow debaters over here need the help from their teachers. Thank you. Because we too need the help from our teachers. Africa too needs help from the developed nations, and it is high time that we accept this help. Secondly, corruption. The problem is not on the first world economies. The problem is we as Africans. That is why I have identified a major problem, which is corruption. Recently, the African Union, which is an organization of African nations, came up with an estimation, which is actually factual, that Bakili Muluzi, who is a Malawian, was recently accused of embezzling $12 million. Imagine. The money apparently was supposed to help their nation to develop. But what did he do? We have to identify our problems as Kenyans. We have to identify our problems as Africans, work on them, and appreciate what the international aid are doing to us. It is high time that we note that Africa needs to develop. We need to take the help from the international aid until we learn how to fish, until we know and understand on how to live and do it on our own. You said, for example, for how long will we live in our parents' house? Not for so long, but let's say you get married elsewhere. You'll still have to come back to your parents to ask for guidance. And that I'd like to say, that even in the Grusinian city, the fruit-growing commune and the farm herders sat together and came to an agreement that indeed dependence on first world economies is not a hindrance to African development. Thank you.
We'll now hear closing submissions. Proposition, you have 1 minute.
Sometimes if you want to see a change for the better, you have to take things into your own hands. You had talked about the late Professor Wangari Maathai going to those first world countries and getting the education, and she came back, to help her own people. Yes, it's true. How about Sonko? He went to the Kenya Methodist University. Isn't he helping his people? You talked about the aid, the foreign aid, taking needy students to abroad schools to educate them, and then they come back to help their own people. How about James Mwangi of Equity? Isn't he helping his own people in Africa? Aren't they making a difference in the society? Yes, they are. So let's not only think that we cannot do without these first world economies. We can also do on our own. After all, a long journey starts with one step. Thank you.
Opposition, you have 1 minute as well.
I agree with my opponent that James Mwangi is doing a great thing. But look at this. Equity scholars are being funded by the MasterCard Foundation. Isn't that a foreign aid? Now let's go on. Political sovereignty is but a mockery without the means of meeting poverty, illiteracy, and diseases. And that self-determination is but a slogan if the future holds no hope. Now, what is political sovereignty? It is the pride. We look at these first world economies. They do have the pride. And in order to be like them, we need to follow them. Because self-growth comes by being nurtured. And you can never change things by fighting the reality. My fellow opponents, I would like to ask you, if you look at our African nations, do you think we have enough capital? Do you think we have enough resources, if not helped by these foreign first world economies? Think about that.
Upperhill, Cynthia, very strong start. And of course a good ending, though it was cross-examined. But that was amazing as a speaker. So at least as a leader of your team, you did very well. Hosanna, Brian, you also picked up well. However, I have a few questions. Number one to Cynthia. If China, as you said, has helped us, has created its own infrastructure, the question is how? All right? How? Because we're really talking about dependence on first world economies as a hindrance of African development. Then we could borrow from that. And we know very well that they have not been borrowing themselves. They have had within themselves a lot of developments in the economy, maybe industrial and all that has enabled them to do all that. For Brian, the question is, how is the cash coming into Africa that is quite huge, even more than the foreign aid coming in, hindering development? That question wasn't answered. So for you, I have one word, fairly good.
Nakuru girls, Faith. I'll speak all round for Faith, Chelegat, and Yvonne. All of you have a really confident approach to the motion, relevant case studies, especially by Faith. However, most studies you'd have given us, there's so much you'd have said. You had lovely, lovely, strong points, but I needed to hear more examples coming from your end. Very well articulated points. The example on the late Wangari Maathai was excellent. Yvonne, you had a strong logical progression of ideas with practical examples cited. So well done.
Upperhill Secondary, the judges awarded you 66%. Please give them a round of applause. Nakuru Girls, with a whooping 77%, you are our winners for the debate.
Congratulations to both teams and especially to Nakuru Girls for a job well done. Thank you for tuning in and watching. Find us on Twitter at Great Debaters EA. I have been your host, Mariam Bishar.
And I am Austin Yumbok. Catch you next time.
The Great Debaters Contest 2016 registration is now open. Teachers or school administrations should register on www.greatdebaterscontest.com/register. The Great Debaters Contest was brought to you by Safaricom M-Pesa.